Hello everyone, you are Mr. Movie Recap. And before we start, subscribe as it is very important for the development of the channel. Let's get 1,000 subscribers. Enjoy the movie. At the beginning of the movie, a woman dressed in a white robe calmly dives into the dark and still water. We are transported to a secluded place. Selah and her sister Tamar are watching the waterfalls as suddenly Selah startles Tamar. The girls leave laughing and make their way through the mountainous terrain to a cluster of wooden huts they call home. There the other women, known as sisters and wives, do chores and sing peacefully. The women prepare meals and watch over the household. They all worship a lone man, the leader of the group, a shepherd. During dinner, the daughters, dressed in blue, line up on one side of the table, while the wives, dressed in red, sit in front of the daughters. When the shepherd finishes eating, he chooses one of the wives to receive his favor. Each night, the daughters sleep separately from their mothers and pray to the shepherd as their god. The next morning, the shepherd holds a teaching among the women. He reminds them of their plight, how he sacrificed himself for them by providing them with everything they need. Now dressed in white dresses, the women admire him as he speaks, but Selah seems preoccupied with her own thoughts. The shepherd then dips his fingers in goat's blood and smears it on the faces of the women, who continue to praise him. Some of the women cry with joy, feeling grateful for the shepherd's blessing. After a while, Selah and Tamar are alone in the forest. Selah sees the shepherd from afar and asks Tamar to go to their hut, leaving Selah alone with him. As the shepherd and Selah walk together, the shepherd mentions that she hasn't listened to his sermon, to which Selah begins to recoil. She then smiles, realizing that he is just teasing her. The shepherd praises her beauty, running his fingers through her loose hair. Selah asks him to tell her a story about her mother, but the shepherd refuses. Instead, he leans in for a kiss, but stops himself. He tells her to let the wives rebraid her hair. The shepherd leaves. Left alone, Selah treasures the moment of their meeting, believing that she will soon be his wife. Back at the hut, Selah and Tabitha attend to household chores. Eliza, one of the wives, blithely shares her experience with the shepherd last night. This makes Selah jealous as Eliza is new to the group and almost the same age as her. But she is already a wife. Tabitha starts fighting with Selah over her speaking ill of wives. Tabitha's mother comes in and settles the argument, ordering Selah to bring the leftover food to the hut where unclean and sinning women live. In the hut, a young woman lies unconscious as she is unclean due to her menses. Another woman, Sarah, emerges from the shadows, exposing her body covered in scars. Sarah is surprised by the handful of leftovers, but Selah reminds her that she needs to eat so that Sarah can be clean again. Selah believes that the women sent to the hut, away from them, must repent and be punished, just like her unconscious sister, who has her period. According to the shepherd, what they are going through is punishment for Eve's sin, but Sarah warns Selah to be ready when her time comes, as she will no longer be special to him. Selah is visibly disturbed by Sarah's words. Outside, Selah kicks rocks to vent her frustration. Later that night, Adrielle, the pregnant wife, puts her daughter Lily to bed in her daughter's room. Lily wants to hear a story, but Adrielle reminds her that only a shepherd can tell them stories. While everyone is asleep, Selah gains an unhealthy obsession with the shepherd, watching him from the window. From the window of his hut, the shepherd stares at Selah as Eloise suddenly appears. Both stare intently at Selah while the shepherd puts his fingers in Elaise's mouth. The next day, while some wives bathe the shepherd, the older wives bathe their daughters. The shepherd instructs Selah to help the sheep give birth. Despite the advice she receives on how to do so, Selah is still stunned by the task. Amidst the landscape, Selah is left alone with the flock of sheep. While waiting for a pregnant sheep to give birth, Selah falls asleep. Upon awakening, she discovers a dying sheep with a newborn lamb. Her thoughts are interrupted when she discovers she is on her period. In the evening, Selah hides in one of the huts to see if there is any blood left. Upon seeing the blood, she wipes herself with her wool and screams in frustration. Back in her hut, Selah tells Tamar that a wild dog has mauled one of the lambs. But in her mind, she sees herself slaughtering the lamb. When the wives learn that the sheep has died, they bring it to the church and the shepherd forgives it. Nevertheless, Selah grieves over what has happened, believing herself to be unclean. One night, when everyone is asleep, Selah overhears a policeman telling the shepherd that they must leave the forest or he will be arrested. The next day, the shepherd announces that they must all go in search of a new home. Then he falls on his back and the women run to his aid. The embarrassed Selah remains in her seat. Then the shepherd smiles and laughs with the women who carry him on their shoulders. Everyone looks forward to traveling to his new home, but Selah remains confused. Later, the shepherd finds Selah alone in the forest. Selah is saddened to leave their home, but the shepherd encourages her to be strong for the sake of her younger sisters. Before leaving the house, the women sing a song as if saying goodbye to the land. The group travels on foot, carrying their clothes and leading a flock of sheep. They travel on foot, stopping occasionally to rest and eat. Along the way, they come across abandoned houses. Selah asks the shepherd why they can't just live in one of them, but the shepherd replies that the place was created by unhappy people. They make another rest stop, and beyond the campfire, Selah finds a tent in front of Selah, where the shepherd hugs Eloise again. That night, Selah returns to the abandoned house and stares at a hanging painting of the landscape. When she turns away, she is surprised to see Eloise smirking at her. However, her smile disappears when she reveals her injured neck. The next day, Tabitha screams as Selah can no longer hide the bloodstains. Because of this, Selah becomes last in line along with Sarah, whom she discriminated against a few days earlier. Meanwhile, a strong wind begins to blow and they rest again in a shady spot. The wives look longingly at the shepherd who is hugging his two daughters, and remember how good they were with the shepherd. The younger wife says that he is no longer interested in them because they are old, to which she is slapped for saying so. At the same time, Selah asks Sarah about her mom. Sarah tells her that her mother did not die after giving birth but from an infection. But the shepherd refused to seek medical help, which led to her death. During the arduous trek, Selah begins to question the shepherd's judgment. When she sees a car driving down the road, she imagines herself as an ordinary teenager. That night, noticing the closeness between Selah and Sarah, the shepherd exploits Sarah's weakness in pining for him and spends the evening with her while everyone sleeps. The next day, the targets are again allowed to walk with the others. The shepherd apologizes for leaving her with Sarah, whom he considers broken. During this, Adrielle experiences labor-induced contractions due to the strenuous hike. The daughters huddle together in fear as they listen to Adrielle's screams. Her wives help her through her contractions, but still she dies. During the funeral, the shepherd pulls the youngest daughter away from her dead mother. Sarah blames the shepherd for her death and even addresses him by the name Michael. The shepherd burns her body while the others sing a farewell song for her. An enraged Selah sees her enraged self again in front of Adrielle's burning corpse. The next day, Selah notices that Sarah is not following them. Sarah tells Selah that she is leaving with the baby. Michael tells them that the baby should be kept as it was not born right. The baby is a boy as they walk on. Tamar gets impatient and asks the shepherd when they will arrive at the supposed house. Tamar senses that they are going in the wrong direction, which enrages the shepherd and he hits Tamar. After a few blows to the head, he drags her and asks Tamar to lead them along the road instead of him. The women cannot do anything about it as they are afraid of being hit too. Selah watches this scene with a fierce look. Later, the shepherd declares the valley with beautiful lake their new home. The journey has shaken the sisters' faith, but the shepherd baptizes them all, which seems like an act of purification and a demonstration of his power over them. The first girl tells them that she feels different again, but when it's Selah's turn, he keeps her underwater longer than the others. While underwater, Selah imagines herself drowning in the scarlet water, dressed in flowing white robes. She remembers all her anger before the shepherd pulls her back to the surface. In the evening, the shepherd calls Selah to his tent, but Tamar tells her not to go. They all hated the shepherd for abandoning his pregnant wife. But Selah comes because she knows she must obey. In the tent, the shepherd tells her to unbraid her braid and praises her beauty for looking like her mother. He possesses her and puts 2 fingers in her mouth so she can't scream. When he is done, Selah remains motionless, looking up and trying to figure out what she is doing here. Her strange visions begin again as her anger flares up inside her. She dreams of her sisters killing a shepherd, devouring him to pieces. That night, Selah breaks her own rules by telling the story she learned from Sarah, as if trying to awaken their minds, and that they deserve so much more. The daughters wake up the next day and find the wives missing. They come to the lake and find the shepherd kneeling among the wives' robes. The shepherd makes up a story about how the women were carried away by the river and that they will now live forever. While the children mourn the loss of their mothers, the shepherd tells his daughters that they must replace the role of his wives. He first asks Selah to marry him and promises her all his grace. However, an indignant Selah refuses his favor and says that he is nothing to them. The shepherd is stunned to be rejected by his favorite daughter, so he slaps her. When Selah imagines what the shepherd has done to his wives, she slaps back even harder. Later, the police arrive at the place where the remains of the old wives have washed away. They follow the trail and discover the shepherd's drawings and evidence that people used to live there. They then encounter a shepherd who is hanging from a tree and appears to be dead. He has ram's horns on his head, suggesting that he is a demon. On the other side, the daughters are standing in front of a waterfall and Selah, standing in front of them, is holding a bleeding lamb in her arms. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It's very simple. The more subscribers, the more videos.